Welcome to On the Chain with Jeff and Chip.
Hey, welcome. This is On the Chain. This is the On the Chain Roundtable. This is Jeff. I'm here with co-host Chip, and we have two exciting guests with us tonight. We've got digital nomad investor that you guys all know. Welcome, DNI.
Hey, thanks for having me aboard, gentlemen.
Awesome. And then we have another guest that you've seen in the community. He's engaged. He's helping and helped put together an amazing meetup that's going to take place in New York City. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on the roundtable. But we've got Digital DINERO Dave. Welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I think DNI refers to him as DDD. So however you want to, or triple D.
Triple D.
Right? Is that what, triple
His
D
wrestling,
is
his wrestling alter ego.
Hey, Jeff, before we get started, can I talk about something? I think we need to address something very important right now, and that is the fact that DNI is wearing his Johnny Cash shirt. He knows how to come to the round table. Can you just stand up and give us that can you just, come on, we get to, look at that, huh? What am I,
that?
Huh?
Man, Johnny Cash.
He knows how to roll.
How did that filter into the conversation? Yeah, he's obviously.
I don't know. It sometimes makes an appearance, Jeff. I don't know how to say it.
It always makes an appearance. Yeah.
Comes in there. Johnny Cash is a legend, Jeff.
And then we got Triple D in the top, representing the XRP logoed hat. Check that out.
Oh yeah, this is actually a customized hat. If you take a look on this side, it says "runs on Ripple." That's my actual QR code.
Wow, cool.
Digital DINERO Dave.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's awesome.
Hey,
that's really cool.
Man. You know, somebody you might get some. Seriously, keep that QR code. Let's see if we can scan it.
Get that tattooed right to the forehead.
Yeah, one day.
And then they change it up
before it's mandatory.
That's right.
Holy cow, we're going deep already, man.
No, we've talked about we've talked about this one before. Actually, it came up, and I made a video on it probably over a year ago, and that's Walmart. And Walmart is talking about doing the RFID embedded chips that was going to be tracked on the blockchain. So it's not that far-fetched, you know, that they want to start tracking. And people from a simplicity perspective think, oh, I'm gonna make it easy because I want to make purchases. But now with the blockchain and RFID and all that other stuff, you're going to be traceable and trackable anywhere you go.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Well, George Gammon, I think his name is. Is it Gammon? That's been doing a lot of videos lately. He talked about where if we do go to an ultimate cashless, worldwide economy, how they'll get us on the whole chipping thing is if you lose your cash card or whatever it is we're going to be using to access our money, they're going to be like, well, the only thing we can do now if you lost your card is give you a chip. We're going to have to put a chip in you. And that's what he was talking about. And I'm like, wow, I never thought about it that way. But, they got you once we go cashless. So
imagine the crimes. Imagine the crimes of 2030.
Crazy.
If they're going to steal your wallet, now they got to steal your chip. So there'll be a lot of people having their hands chopped off.
Yeah, maybe. Exactly. But hey, look how it plays in. So Amazon wants shoppers to pay with the wave of a hand. This story appeared a couple of days ago. So what they're doing is planning on having terminals like in coffee shops and fast food restaurants. And how it works is you go in there and you wave your hand over this terminal, and this is going to be how you're going to be able to purchase stuff. So it pays by linking clients' credit card information to their hands, allowing them to use their palms.
It's NFC in your hand instead of on your phone.
I don't think it's NFC though. I think what they're doing is they're reading the individualistic
the biometric type stuff.
Yeah, biometric type stuff. But man, that plays right into this conversation if you think about it. This is getting. In the future, we'll have flying cars. Well, right now we're talking about biometrics, or like I said, maybe a chip to put in your hand. I don't know. I'm not interested in doing that. I don't know. Are you guys interested in that, DNI? What do you think about that?
No, heck no. I'm not going to give up my privacy for convenience. And that's the whole sales pitch that the powers that be have done a wonderful job from a propaganda standpoint, if I could go down this road, of, just conditioning the world that, through getting rid of bank branches and making, having fewer ATMs and all this other thing, making it more inconvenient to get to and use your cash. So people just naturally gravitate towards their plastic, and most of us, when we were growing up, plastic was just to be used if you had a your car broke down or you had a medical emergency. But now it's just the opposite. It's everyday use. And it's because mostly I'd say 80-90% of the excuses are that it's convenient. And I get that. There is a big component to that. And then the remaining, I think people cite security reasons of not, carrying money around. But, it's just a conditioned response, I think. But no, I'm not into any of that. I'm not really totally inconvenienced by having to take a cash out of my pocket or a credit card out of my pocket versus implanting a chip in my arm.
Triple D, what's your take, Triple D? What do you think about this whole?
Yeah, I completely agree with him. I don't want to give up, myself basically for the convenience of it.
But it's going to be easy, Dave. You just take your hand and you wave it, man. It's going to be easy.
Not worth it. I mean, you couldn't even hide in the mountains at that point.
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, and that's the primary concern. Now we say, oh, well, it's only, if you're a criminal or if you have criminal intent, then that's where it's going to impact your life. But truthfully, you're giving up too much. We've already given up enough, and that's maybe a conversation for another show. And it's actually a good time to plug there's going to be a new show coming up on the chain, and actually host of the show is going to be Digital Nomad Investor, DNI, who's right below us. And the title of the show so far is going to be Deep Dive, and it's going to deep dive into a lot more of those types of conversations. And so more on that later.
Okay.
But moving along. But I thought that was a nice plug. But to that topic, I think it's interesting because we've already given up a significant amount of privacy, especially in this digital asset space, where our purchases, they're talking about tracking everything that we do from a financial perspective. Now, maybe it's a little bit harder. If you keep cash in your house, if you keep, collectibles in your house, if you keep money in the bank, the government's not observing every last dollar that you have in the bank. Or if you go to the store and buy something and you use cash or credit card, now the different entities are tracing it. The credit card companies, Amazon, all of the corporates are tracking your purchasing habits, each one individually and selling it. So we've already had a huge invasion of privacy. But what does it mean when the government now has access to that information in real time? What do you think? Well, let's start with Triple D on that one. We'll go down around.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really crazy. It's to be able to just know everything you're spending every single cent on at all times. I mean, it feels like a complete invasion of privacy, like completely and totally, no doubt about it. You have absolutely nothing to do with anything private anymore. Basically, once you're on the blockchain, you're there forever. It's just like anything that's on the internet, it's there forever, unless you happen to be a government or something that can pay all these billions of dollars to get it off. You're stuck with it. You're just stuck with everybody knowing anything they want.
Like this video.
Yeah.
For infinitum. What do you think, DNI?
Well, when you talk to people about it, and what you said reminding me of this, Jeff, people like, only criminals have something to worry about. I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't have anything to worry about. But, we have passwords, we have screen IDs and things like that. We do have things that we want to keep secret. We do have, information we want to keep secret that is legitimate, that isn't breaking laws, or having to do with criminal activity. So for people to say, I'm not doing anything wrong, I have nothing to hide, that's not true, and that doesn't work anymore. We have things to hide. Like I said, financial security, financial privacy, and I can tell you if I can share a government story, behind the scenes story about this. I went to a training about using social media to investigate, terrorism. And the agents that were training us, and this was at a fusion center. For anyone that wants any information on a fusion center, just look it up. And they told us how they were using Facebook and using link analysis through the friends lists of people, and to investigate, the people they were investigating, person of interest. The thing that that doesn't sound nefarious or anything, right? Because you're like, okay, well, if it's someone that's, you know, potentially doing criminal activity, okay, so what? The so what part changes when you learn how they do their link analysis with a friends list. And what they do is they'll take, you know, the person of interest friends, direct friends, then they start moving 1 to 2 hops out or 1 to 2 generations out. So then they go to the person of interest friends list. And depending on how far they want to go out, you know, they can go out, you know, as many generations as they want or hops. But now all those people are on the radar of, you know, in this case, it was a federal case, so for terrorism, but, you know, other agencies can do that as well. So it may not be good enough anymore that you're not doing something wrong. You may be 100% innocent, but that may not be enough. And trust me on this, if they think you have something to do with someone else's crime, just because you're a friend on their friends list, they're going to lean on you, which means if they want, and they have total freedom to do so. So, you know, this whole thing about I'm innocent, I have nothing to worry about doesn't work anymore in this day and age. And that's just one small example. Now, I know that sounds rare, but, you know, think about it. You're now responsible for not only your behavior, but everyone on your friends list. Then you have to start worrying about your friends' lists and so on. And that it's not a paranoid thing. That's part of what they do as part of the investigations. So, you know, do I want to be responsible for everyone on my friends list? Heck no, let alone everyone on all of their friends lists. You know, even if it just goes the 2 hops to my friends and one more ring, you know, and then they start linking things. And if they think, you know, they may say, oh, wait a minute. And then how this plays in, cut me off when I'm rambling too much. You know, the government wants to have a digital record of everything we do from our birth till death. That's their ultimate goal. And to be able to access that going backwards. So, you know, there's a saying like every day we break how many laws, right? 10 laws, 50 laws or whatever, because there's so many laws on the book. So all they have to do, it's real simple. You know, I've seen them do it and I've been part of cases where I've been involved in it. And, you know, you find something someone's done. And if you want them to talk about somebody, you lean on them and you find a weakness. And you see this stuff on TV. Some of it's accurate. You know, and you just say, oh, I see on your taxes, oh, that's kind of an unusual tax return you did 5 years ago, you know, and then you just go from there. So I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but it's just no longer, you know, good to give up your financial privacy and security. I don't think it's a good idea.
You bring up an interesting point going into tax returns. And I think it's a good segue into some different proposals that are going on right now in Congress. However, before we get there, you know, we want to talk a little bit about the H.R. 5635 that was recently proposed, which is the Virtual Currency Tax Fairness Act. But before we get into that, let's look at what the ramification is of what you just said, and let's look at from a tax perspective when it relates. Before we talk about the Fairness Act and what that means, right now in the blockchain space, for every transaction that is made with a digital asset in or out of fiat, in or out of a different digital asset, is a taxable event. And imagine how right now there's a lot of people in this space that have probably traded digital asset, and it's extremely difficult to track those trades. And even, you know, moving again into fiat, you know, from, you know, in the heyday, you know, back in 17, you know, almost every single day there was a gain in your digital asset movement, and you're going from fiat to Bitcoin to an altcoin. And there was a taxable event when that happened because you made money on that transaction if you held it overnight, as an example. There's a lot of implication there. And now what you're talking about even has more implication, you know? So, you know, what does that mean to us? You know, Triple D, what do you think? I mean, that's from a tax implication, it's difficult. It's really difficult to think about that.
It's kind of like the movie Eagle Eye. You guys ever seen that movie, Eagle Eye, where the AI has all your information and it knows the person's next move? And
was Jake Gyllenhaal in that? Or is that
No,
who
it wasn't. I honestly, I can't remember.
One of
who was
those
in it.
guys.
It was
One
one
of
of
those
those
guys.
guys, though. Yeah, it was one of
One
those
of those
guys.
guys.
But, I mean, basically, that's the main goal of the government. I mean,
Yeah.
and with the AI coming out and put the AI with the blockchain, it feels like it's going to be a certainty fairly soon, especially when they start with those implants. Forget it.
Yeah, and then Canada's already investigating and making the government, they're looking at proposals to start tracking everybody's purchases on the blockchain specifically to make sure that everybody's paying their taxes. And so DNI, what does that mean? What does that mean
Well,
to
I
you?
mean, that is the end game. The reason why, they want to be able to trace everything, track it, to tax it, and to be able to, if they need to, unbank you, as Andreas Antonopoulos said, and turn you off if you're in Hong Kong and you're protesting, and if you have a chip in your body, and they could just go by with a a scanning machine by all the protesters and just unbank everybody, with one swipe, things like that. So that's the end game of all of that. In addition to the other things, because law enforcement and the powers that be use tax laws. We used to call it Al Capone somebody when we couldn't bust somebody. This is back when I used to do the white collar crime stuff, investigating, not the crime. And
back in the good old days.
If you couldn't get them on a bigger charge, you get them on a more mundane, routine charge that you have more evidence on somebody for. So, that opens that up tax wise, because there's no clarity on the taxes now at all. And, Coinbase and I'm sure other exchanges are sending, their membership information to the IRS. I don't know about any, other ones. And I don't know if they're sending all of their, Coinbase customers to the IRS or just
initially it was anybody that had transactions over 10,000.
Okay.
I think that's where, from a reporting perspective, that,
Yeah.
if you have $1,000 transaction, you made $50. I don't think they really care. It's too much. But now you put everybody on the blockchain, and that $50 all of a sudden becomes relevant because it's real time, easy to go after somebody. And it's interesting too. We think about AI. Look at what happens going on in Twitter. And these are awesome conversations for the new show that's going to be coming up with DNI called Deep Dive. There's just a little snippet.
Another plug, people.
Another plug. But you think about, what goes on in Twitter and the AI on Twitter, where it's, even on YouTube, I don't want to say indiscriminately, but it's indiscriminately, I think that is the right word. It's indiscriminately, banning people from the platform based on maybe key algorithms, but it's misreading into it. And so all of a sudden Twitter's canceling people, YouTube's canceling people based on AI. And soon, the future could see the AI is going to cancel people's bank accounts and you'll have no access. Positives. Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
could you imagine?
Yeah, I was going to jump in here because, we saw Kevin Cage get a strike this week. He announced down for 7 days. And of course, what happens? I mean, people are asking, well, what happened? Well, that's the whole thing. He doesn't know what happened, right? Nobody really ever knows what happened. And it's like, that's when I see people going down, you see the XRP tip bot going down.
The tip bot,
And meanwhile, it's under impersonation was the reason they finally cited to Vita Wind. And they say that it was impersonation. Okay, and he put out a really powerful tweet that said, impersonation, my code, my project, my initiative, written by me, attributed to me, and impersonation how? So when you start seeing these things, these kind of strikes that happen to a channel, now just speaking from personal, I would say when this, wherever this airs on different places, but on the YT, let's use the YT, that'll be decoded, but when it went down, I want to go back to what DNI said. He said, you're basically guilty. It used to be you were innocent until proven guilty. The issues that I have with this is they take the move, right? Boom, you're off Twitter. Now you got to go prove yourself whether you're going to be, your own innocence. How do you do that? You got to fight for it, right? You got to fight for, why, what happened. And then maybe a human, nobody knows, a human another AI, another level, a lower level person, a contractor. There's no clarity in who looks at it. They might look at it. Well, in my case, it came back and they just said, "Oh, you're reinstated." That was it. There was no like, "Oh, what happened to the company that made the false claim?" No, nobody knows what happened. So now we're moving into a sector where private companies are, you're guilty, go prove your innocence. Until then, you're going to be banned. You're going to have a strike. You're going to be out of the sort of the off the public eye. And and I think it all plays back to if they're a publisher or if they're not a publisher. And I think there's a move, and I think I read something recently, maybe you guys know this, but there's some sort of a move to move them back into publisher status, because as a publisher, there's certain things they can and can't do. But as a private company, they can be like, hey, this is a free thing. We don't want you on here, right? And they're hiding behind that. We don't want you on here. And really what they're doing is they're squishing and they're squashing free speech. And there's always stuff on Twitter where I see like fragile souls out there, and they are fragile, man. They go like, "Oh, I just blocked somebody. You're blocked." I'm like, that is the big move I've ever seen in my life. I blocked you. How can I be an advocate of free speech? Come at me, man.
You, Chip.
Come at me all day long, baby. Come at me. You got what you got. You'll tire long before I even care. And
Chip, you bring up another solid point here. And we can't skip over this one, but you're talking about the corporate responsibility, for their users. But we're seeing an invasion of our legal system at all levels. So the corporates have a responsibility to adhere to the legal system and do things from a legal perspective. Our Congress has the responsibility to do things from a legal perspective, but we're seeing an intrusion on rights across the board. So we see Congress, that's both the House and the Senate, stepping on the First Amendment, trying to squash the Second Amendment, and we see a complete invasion of the rights of the President of the United States as well, where right now they're trying him, which it's an insane process that we're seeing unfold in the House, and now we're seeing it in the Senate, where he has to prove his innocence, right? So that's what they're claiming. And so from what you just said as well, now you're guilty until proven innocent by yourself. And that's completely incorrect. You're innocent until you prove me guilty. If you can't prove me guilty, but now they're saying you're guilty, but now let's see you're innocent. So we're seeing it in Congress. We're seeing it with Twitter. We're seeing it on YouTube. But I think that the ramifications are so much greater than what we're seeing, because we're seeing an entire generation of kids in this millennial movement and younger, that it now becomes the norm of society, to where you're guilty until you can prove your own innocence. And so I think you're right, and now we have to really make sure that we take a stand against these corporate entities that are doing the same thing as our government is doing, and hold the government responsible as well as the corporate entities responsible. Because if they're going to create a norm in society, then everything changes. And I think that's a dangerous path to walk down.
Hugely dangerous there, Jeff. I mean, so another topic that I'd like to pop into, there's been a lot of chatter this past week about a tweet that actually went out, a Brad Garlinghouse statement, and really had to do with, will Ripple do an IPO, right? So I want to get some feedback on that from the crew, and let's go around. I want to find out what your thoughts are, because it really blew up Twitter. I was shocked. I absolutely was shocked that to me, and I'll express what I think about it, but I want to go to Triple D first. When you first heard that, when people started going crazy, and we had people for, against, people not knowing, what was your initial thought when you saw this blowing up on Twitter?
I couldn't understand why anyone would be against it. Honestly, the first thing that, go ahead, Chip.
Let's hear your
please go ahead. Yeah. What were you thinking?
I mean, right away, I was like, wow, that's Wall Street money coming into to Ripple, which is translates into XRP eventually. I mean, it might be a long-term game, but I mean, if they know what the ecosystem is capable of and realize what it's able to do, once that Wall Street money gets to Ripple, I feel like it's just going to make XRP sky high as well.
Gotcha. DNI, what were your thoughts on it? And, you know, when you initially saw it, and like, what are your thoughts if you had some time to kind of think about it a little bit?
Yeah, my first thought, you know, that wasn't the financial aspect. It was the video of Brad Garlinghouse saying how he thinks in terms of 3 years, 5 years, et cetera. That's like, that just popped right into my head. And I thought, under a corporate structure that's so focused on quarterly profits, quarterly growth, quarterly numbers, I'm like, that's just a clash right there. Now, that was like just a knee-jerk reaction. And I know one of the first people actually I talked to it about was Jeff. We chatted somewhere. I don't know if it was in the live stream or where. It might have been my stream. And I said, you know, I don't know. I'm worried about, you know, Brad Garlinghouse and others at the company, you know, their long-term thinking and vision being squashed and sliced and diced into, you know, quarters that the shareholders think by. And I know, Jeff, you said something which made perfect sense about, I think it was adding legitimacy to Ripple as a company and the business landscape. I'm paraphrasing what you said.
Yeah.
I hope that sums it up.
I think he has a photographic memory in him.
But you know, for the important stuff. And you know, no, it was a very good point, and it made sense. Now that I'm kind of filtering through it all, and then, you know, including the financial component, I think, of course, you know, I mean, another thing I thought of is they don't need the money because they just got 200 million. And I know that's not all going to go to hiring, 49 people plus some offices, you know, but we don't know what their plans are for acquisitions either. So the more I thought about it, I at first my knee-jerk reaction was against it, just because I think Ripple's doing well now, and, you know, that long-term thinking that Brad talked about. But the more I kind of looked at more data about her information, I'm like, okay, I can see where it makes sense. You know, I just hope that it just doesn't squash their vision. That's my concern, and because of a corporate structure. But other than that, yeah, the money flowing in, the legitimacy and exposure on Wall Street, of course, all of those are positive, no doubt about it. And, you know, it coming to the forefront in, you know, the financial space, Wall Street, you know. So I guess I'm like 80% for it, and 20% I'm reserved.
Okay, let me lay it down here, people. Here's the thing. What do we always hear about
negative?
It's not negative. It's actually very
Oh,
positive.
no, kidding.
What do we hear about Ripple all the time, right? Oh, they've got over 300 partners. Well, who are they? Well, we know some, excuse me, know who some of them are. You know, the public disclosure that happens with the public company, the scrutiny, the board of directors, fiduciary responsibility, when you have to, you have shareholders, right? So you're running to that, and you alluded a little bit on the, on their policy, and everything's crafted around this sort of focus. So if they're moving right now under the radar, keeping these NDAs, well, this is great, because I go to any public, I go pull, you know, their quarterlies, their annuals, and sometimes they don't disclose it, but if you know how to read between the lines, you'll see who the acquisitions were. So-and-so was acquired for an undisclosed sum. Well, guess what? Guess where that undisclosed sum is hidden? So you go pull it, and what they'll do
financials.
often is the financials. So and so this, I find, is a clash between their responsibility as a private company to, you know, they have their own responsibility to these banks, these financial institutions they're working with, and to be able to start disclosing that in a public manner is a direct conflict, right? I think when I look in the space, I want to give a huge shout out to Crypto Eddie, because this had blown up. I watched her video, and I think she nailed every single part of it and got every part of it right. It was a lot of the things that I was thinking. My dog Max is in the background. What's up, Max? And
He agrees with you.
He agrees, yeah.
He agrees all the time, which I like, because it's always good to have a loyal dog, Jeff. Oh, I got my dog just chiming in the background. He's
Really,
outside
mine's
the
not
door
loyal.
here. My underground.
Oh, is that what it was?
You know?
I knew there was some dig in there somewhere.
Well, sometimes he gets over in that computer and he starts biting on the wire there, and I'm like, I have to calm him down a little bit. But you think about the public scrutiny that has to go on. So it's not like listen, I think that every company, your end game should always be an IPO, but let's look at the space. Look what happened with WeWork, right? WeWork's valuation in August, they went from, you know, a SoftBank, which is massively investing billions of dollars into companies. They had this massive valuation and it dropped by billions of dollars, okay, in a matter of about a week and a half. Then they removed the CEO, and then they took a $5 billion write-off. That's what SoftBank took last year because of this debacle. And let's look at the space last year. It's not a friendly time to be IPOing, right? You have Uber, you had Lyft, and their shares have tanked like tremendously since they IPO'd. And you look back to the days when Facebook first launched. I think ultimately it's a good idea, but I agree. Garlinghouse is a master. He's a master when it comes to, work in the public. He's really I'm really just so happy he's leading the way because he knows how to put stuff out there, and he said, we'll be leading, right? Leading, because they'll be one of the leaders as far as the blockchain companies. And he was really getting into all of the blockchain companies. At some point, you will see them IPO. You will see them get into public, right? And I don't see it happening for Ripple for a very long time. I really don't see it. And I could be wrong, and who knows, I am. But I just see that is their end game, but they've got to get the landscape settled too, right? I mean, it is expensive to open these corridors, right? It does take a lot of time and energy. And we saw, I think it's Alex Holmes at the MoneyGram CEO, where he's saying stuff like, this isn't happening fast enough. Well, of course it's not. They don't want their money sitting in accounts for settlement in all these countries. They want it to be a little bit more liquid. So anyway, I just think that my thought on it is I think it would be a great thing if they do it. I just think there's too many hurdles at the moment. And, Crypto Eddie brought up the thing that they haven't done their roadshow, right? They're not out there hitting the stuff. And I've been closely associated with companies that have gone public, and man, it's a lot of work. There's the scrutiny, the SEC. I think that when companies finally IPO, I do feel that it takes a while to get their footing, to do the legal requirements. There was another bill raised that their financial reporting would go from quarterly to twice a year because of all the stuff and running around you have to do, the calls and all the stuff you have to make just because of the public disclosure. I think companies, you watch how their moves are after they IPO, they stumble a little bit. It takes them a while to get their stuff back, their mojo. So I don't know, Jeff, I mean, where am I going wrong in this conversation? Did I miss something there? I mean, what are your thoughts as far as the, Ripple IPO?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I think there's definitely some ramification if they go IPO and they open themselves up to the public domain. And you think about what their end goal is, which is to be a transactional, corridor between banks. And I think banks don't like, banks do trade, you can buy stock in banks, but banks also like to keep things a little bit tight knit. In terms of how they've been functioning. You look at SWIFT, as they do their cross-border transactions, that's not a privately traded organization. It's a cooperative that's owned by the banks. But at the same point, I think, from that same perspective, whether, the governments are looking at it or these banks are looking at it, do they want a private entity controlling all of those corridors? And I think that's the one element that Ripple is alluding to also, is that we want to be more decentralized, even in our functionality and our decision-making process. We need to be responsible to a broader community. We don't want to necessarily just be responsible to the banks. We can't just be responsible to Ripple. We need to be responsible to the community at large, which also resolves and solves, I think, a lot of the different problems. But at the same token, that could be a long-term strategy. It creates that normalcy in the mainstream world for the banks, where they feel more comfortable, opening up and moving everything over. I don't know. I mean, that's, but at the same point, you brought up a good comment on the fact that if they do go public, their scrutiny on that organization is a lot more. And are they in a position right now where that is detrimental to further growth? Is it gonna hold them back? So I think it's a hard comment to make, because there's pros and cons to both sides of it. Obviously, if you go IPO, it's a huge injection of cash flow. If they are going to be going out there and buying a lot of organizations in the payment space, that would be a method to do it. To have a huge injection. So Yeah, so I think that could definitely be an important aspect of it. I don't
Maybe
know.
they could take a majority position in MoneyGram.
Yeah, that too. They could do that. That
Well,
could be and Western Union.
right.
Yep.
And the other thing that
Hostile
that,
takeover
hostile takeover is what I was just going to get
of
into.
Western Union. Yeah.
You open yourself up. Well, I mean, look at who's flush with cash out there. I mean, you could see someone like an Apple, you know, who wants to be in the space, and boom, now they own the space. Even somebody like Swift pops in, you know. So these things right there, this hostile takeover, and that possibility is there too. And you
It's
want
a reality.
It's the big reality, and that was something that Crypto Eddie brought up on her broadcast. And I think that is so right, spot on. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen 3-5 years. When the climate is right, it will happen. And that's where, you know, I tend to agree with what, you know, Triple D was saying. He's right, because the influx of cash and being able to do really a lot of things and build a team. They're building this team. But again, man, you bring in you raise a couple $2 billion, and now that's a game changer too. So I think you're right on with that comment too, Triple D. But I think really what Garlinghouse was trying to say was, like, this is a private company. You know, it's funny, they still call it a startup. It started in 2012. Where last time I checked, that was 8 years ago, right? I mean, how long you become a startup for? It's 2029, and this fledgling little startup that's worth $120 billion, right? I'm like, what? Startup. I mean, I think once you pass that 5-year mark, I think
5-year mark.
you
Yeah.
gotta like shed that, like, you know, that startup thing, right?
That code of innocence.
That's
Yeah.
right, exactly. So yeah, so let's take a step back. You know, we kind of skipped over this. I think it's important to talk about at this point because we gave good comments on the IPO. But so the H.R. 5635, you know, what does that mean to us? We talked a lot about the Token Taxonomy Act last year. The Token Taxonomy Act was sitting in the Financial Services Committee in Maxine Waters' hands. The ball was dropped there. There's still a lot of indecisiveness, you know, maybe a misunderstanding of what Bitcoin is, and
Touche.
Well done, Maxine.
and everything else. And so now there's a proposal, and what's critical here, you know, we saw Darren Soto. He's a congressman up in northern Florida, Orlando area. He worked with Warren Davidson out of Ohio on the Token Taxonomy Act. And that bill was initially proposed by Warren Davidson and co-sponsored with Darren Soto. One of the things that I know, in order to get legs on a bill, it has to be bipartisan. If it's not bipartisan and getting support from both sides, it's never going to go anywhere. It's going to be dead on arrival. Unfortunately, the Token Taxonomy Act is now dead in Congress. It's never going to get out of the Financial Services Committee. We could dig into that. There are a lot of important aspects to it in the normalcy of the digital asset space. One section of the Token Taxonomy Act, and I think what we're going to see now is that they're going to break out certain segments of the Token Taxonomy Act. One of them is H.R. 5635, which is looking to change the IRS revenue, or the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, which, you know, has some ramification. We don't have to get into the full explanation of what the Internal Revenue Code is, but the fact that what they want to do is add virtual currency, digital asset to it to identify that it exists. And so the title of this bill that's being proposed, and it was just introduced on January 16th, so about a week ago. Now it's sitting in the Ways and Means Committee, which is going to handle tax. Important that it's not in the Financial Services Committee, because if it was, it probably wouldn't go anywhere. But now it's in the Ways and Means Committee. It's sponsored primarily, let me get this name right, by a Congresswoman, Susan with a Z, Delbene, from Washington, Democrat. So she's proposing it. She introduced it, and the co-sponsors on this. So there's two Democrats on it, 2 Republicans. And it's a nice bipartisan introduction. Obviously, it means that there's one more congressperson that's on board with virtual currency, that understands the importance of digital assets and some regulation and clarity in the space. But we see David Schweikert, Republican out of Arizona. He's been on some of the previous bills that were proposed. We see Rep. Tom Emmer, Republican out of Minnesota. He's not only been on some of the bills, he's proposed some bills. And I think one of his bills actually did pass through Congress earlier last year. And then we have Darren Soto, Democrat out of Florida, that was on the Token Taxonomy Act. So they came out strong with a nice bipartisan support on this bill. Now, here's the other side of it. So what they want to be able to do, and we were talking a little bit earlier about tax implication. So part of the Virtual Currency Tax Fairness Act is to try to make it easier for everybody to use digital asset, digital currency, virtual currency, and give a little bit of a buffer on the taxable event. Now, that taxable event, again, means that you're going from fiat to fiat, or from digital currency to fiat, or digital currency to digital currency. If there's a gain, a realized gain in that transaction, meaning that you made money, that amount of money is taxable. So what they're doing and what they're proposing in the Virtual Currency Tax Fairness Act is that there'll be a $200 buffer, meaning that in each transaction, if you move from Bitcoin to XRP, if you go from Bitcoin to Ethereum, if you go from XRP to USD, and you make under that $200 threshold, there'll be no tax implication. Anything above it is taxable. Now think about, that's not a $200 transaction, it's a $200 gain.
Profit.
And everything above that. Now, if you go out and you say, hey, I'm holding, I don't know, let's say a value of, $5,000, and I have to go out and, buy something with my digital asset. But I bought that currency when it was valued at $1,000, now you have a $3,800 taxable event on that purchase, because $200 of it's not taxable. Good, bad, indifferent. That's what's being proposed right now, and that's pretty much it. There's probably a little bit more that we can read into it and explain it, but Triple D, what kind of impact is that going to have? Is this just kind of just a little bit of fluff? Is it meaningless? Is it going to help gain a little bit of attention? We don't even know if it's going to pass the House and the Ways and Means Committee, but what do you think?
It's I feel like it's going to be more on we're going to have to wait and see what it really is going to be able to do for us or anyone. Companies like Ripple or the banks that are going to be using XRP, if it happens to jump really quickly and they're actually holding, what's going to happen to them? Is it going to apply to everyone? Is it going to apply to some? I mean, there's just so many unanswered questions having to do with it still that, I don't really have a good solid standing to make an opinion on it yet, because we just don't know what it's going to entail.
What do you think, DNI?
I think it's a good baby step, just getting that whole structure of taxes and crypto into the same discussion. I don't, doesn't sound like something that's going to be like an end, where we're going to end up, in a year, 2 years, tax wise with crypto. So, I don't see it as, how can I say this? I don't see it as really impactful, just because I don't think that's going to be the end result. Does that make sense? I think it's a baby step. There's nothing, you're going to have to get the tax structure going towards this space. And people talk about legitimacy and, things like that. And that's part of it, is taxing it, unfortunately. But I just don't, you look at that and you're like, okay, there's not much to it. And I think it's just a baby step to getting us where, eventually we'll end up.
I tend to agree with that. I mean, it's so funny. I pulled it up and I'm looking at it right now, and it's so short. I mean, it's almost like, hey, let's pass this paragraph.
Nothing in it.
There's nothing in it. The whole thing is like a short title. It's like short title, this act and this virtual currency and la, la, la. And it really, the whole thing is one paragraph. Gross income of an individual shall not include gain by reason of changes, blah, blah, blah. And another, it's 2 sentences. Forget about paragraphs, right? This whole kind of stuff right here, it's good because what the upside of this, I think this is a big nothing burger, right? There's nothing here. There's no,
right.
It's like, let's pass something. It has the world virtual currency on it. And I thought it blew up and went crazy and writing articles and, oh my gosh, this and that. And you know, Jeff was the first one that nailed this one, where he said all they did was lift something, one little piece, one little tiny little sliver. They carved it out of the token taxonomy and said, okay, let's pull the one piece of the Ways and Means Committee, because you guys have to deal with the rest of it, but let's try to get something passed. The upside is, let's say some bipartisan comes together, you know, some from both sides, and he's like, yeah, we can pass this. And if you saw all the bickering that's been going on in Congress, right? But they did pass the USMCA, which is the trade in North America between, you know, the US, Canada, and Mexico. You know, all this stuff's flying and bottles are flying back and forth and chairs, and all of a sudden, this thing gets passed. Why? Because it is really bipartisan. How are you gonna, you know, you look at the upside, and I'm not gonna get drill too much into it, but you look at what dairy farmers were importing into Canada. They were paying like $2 tariffs. So guess what? They weren't selling cheese and milk into Canada, right? So when people started looking at these bills and started really looking at them, you're like, well, let's see. You know, hey, listen, Triple D, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna buy your little widget from you, and you know, I'm gonna buy it from you at face value, right? It's gonna cost me $5. You can buy mine for $5, but I'm gonna put a $2, you know, a little sort of a tariff on that. So you think that's cool? Well, you know, that's how it's going to work, you know, or I put it on yours and I can't interface with you. But when I look at when stuff does get done, you know, Jeff hit it again. I mean, it really comes down to there has to be an upside, because at the end of the day, I know all the weird stuff that's going on in Congress, and you know, everyone's upset. Bottom line is they got to go back to their district at some point. They got to have a conversation. They don't do the town halls anymore because they get scalped, right? They get taken down. They don't even make it up to the front of the room before they get tackled at the knees, right? You know, right? So they don't even do this anymore. So they, you know, they're out there and they're doing their thing, and now they're like, you know how we handle our constituents? We ignore them. That's how we do it. And that's kind of how that's what their upside is. We don't do these anymore. We don't want to be in public, right? But
easy fix.
But how could both parties not pass this? I mean, you looked at, well, what the big move here is the companies would like walk past Canada, they would sneak in through the US and end up in Mexico because of the labor, and they're like, let's build a BMW. Well, now they got to pay wages. They have to pay a minimum of $12 an hour, not $1 an hour, or 50, you know. So now it's good. And then so many of the parts have to be sourced from the US and Canada. So what really just happened there is that North America became a powerhouse. And I love that we're doing it together with our neighbors, right? Canada to the north, which is just the US light, and Mexico to the south, which is a whole different animal altogether. But, you know, at some point, Mexico will be pulled up because of this sort of alliance. And really, we just created a powerhouse right there. I don't know. That's my talk. I don't want to get on a tangent, but you have to be bipartisan on this stuff.
You have to be. Yeah, trade is critical. NAFTA was something, it's crazy. You know, I look back to when I was in graduate school, and I wrote a whole paper on NAFTA. And at the time, I obviously didn't understand it enough, you know, based on what it would be interesting to go back and read my paper on NAFTA. But
we're going to do that next week on the next round.
We're going to do that. We're going to review that next week, and then I'll kill my political career moving forward. It's interesting because it's so important to work in this hemisphere. That was one of the biggest mistakes that we made in the US, was ignoring our neighbors to the point where ignoring them from a perspective that we should be focused on lifting them up economically and not just allowing them to languish in poverty, you know, or let them try to figure things out, or even from a political perspective, try to give them more support, because an economically free southern border means more money for us, more money for them. If there's a lot of wealth in Mexico, I'm not talking about the vacation spots, which aren't really Mexico. Those are fake Mexico, you know, but if you go into the proper parts of Mexico, and there's a lot of wealth down there now, you know, it's amazing. But But that should have been a big focus of ours to say, hey, we want a strong trading partner. If we're going to build factories down there, there's a purpose, because we want to not just have cheap labor, but we want to build them up economically. So we have a strong economic hemisphere. And same thing, you go a little further south into Latin America, it's the same connotation. We have a strong Europe, not all throughout Europe, for instance, you've got Asia building up, but that's way over there. That's not in our backyard. So that's why this new trade pact is so critical, because it's now or never. We have somebody in the White House that understands it from a business perspective, what it means long term. Whether you agree with him politically or not, it doesn't matter. It's what does matter, what Chip just mentioned, is that it has bipartisan support, because they all realize at this point in time this economic significance to the U.S. and to our partners, our neighbors, of what this is really going to mean long term.
Incredible, Jeff. I can't wait to read that paper. I'm going to be honest with you. I
burned it. I burned that paper.
Oh, it's probably somewhere. I
no, I don't. I have to go back and dig it up. It'll be interesting to dig it up. I'm dying to find it. I don't know where it is. I'll find it. I'll definitely find it. I remember putting a lot of time and effort and work into putting that together.
And I heard about your interview with Ross Perot too back then. And
oh yeah, good old Ross Perot. And that's funny. I can remember Ross Perot, and I was supporting Ross Perot, for a little bit, until he came out with his running mate. What was his name? He was an admiral, right?
Colonel Tom Parker. No, I don't remember what it was.
What was his name? Do you remember him? It was, I don't know. I can't remember his name. The guy he was a military, but he was really amazing, when he was in military. But then he's up on stage and he was going a little senile. And that was the end of Ross Perot. That was quick. That wasn't it, but there was more to it. Yeah. Stockdale.
That wasn't the end of it. The end of it was when he when he put his foot off the gas and went to the brake. By the way, a guy named John McCain did the same thing. Anyway, so he
right. Oh yeah, there was a lot more to it, but yeah,
there was a lot more to it. But he did that. But really, if it wasn't for Ross, the person that should have the most affinity for Ross Perot is a guy named Bill Clinton. Without Ross Perot filtering some of the vote with like 10, 11, 12%, he never gets elected. And Bush wins, and history's changed forever. But Ross Perot, I'm gonna tell you something, right? We got a chart, we got a graph right over here, right? We do this right here. It's like we gotta pull this thing together, right? We gotta be, and we're just burning through money. I love that guy. When I was up in Detroit, so here we got another Detroit connection. Triple D, you ever spend time in Detroit or log some significant time there?
No, I never have. I've never been to Detroit. I've been to Cali. I've been up and down the whole East Coast, but never to Michigan.
Shit, Michigan is still kind of flyover country. It's almost like a stopover
but
part.
I'm just saying that we spent some time there. So
three of us have spent time in Detroit.
Story. I went and interviewed at a company called EDS, and that was obviously founded by Ross Perot. I went to go interview there, and at the time I had long hair, and so what I did, I was ever able to cleverly put it up in a weird way that I was able to talk and do all this stuff. Now,
tuck it in your collar.
Back then, you could not have tassels. Back then it was popular to have like a little flappy tassel on your dress shoe. So you had to wear. You couldn't have that, right? And
no rat tails.
Yeah,
on your hair.
And so the whole time during the interview, all I'm thinking about is, geez, man, I hope my hair doesn't just like fall out, because I'm done. I'm going to be done with this interview. And they were talking. They were, it was. I felt like it was an interrogation. And think about this. This is like 25, 30 years ago. It's the early 90s, right? Let me do the math. 27, add the 3. Yeah, it's about that long ago. And you look at now, and if you were two people cohabitating together, you had to keep it a secret. You couldn't let anybody know. They looked down and frowned. I was like, this is the 90s, man. It wasn't like the 1600s. We weren't the Salem witch trials, but that's the company that it was. That was the organization that Ross Perot built. And I always thought back then, what if a business guy gets in? Forget about these people. We see what happens in Congress with Bitcom, Maxine Waters, and they're so senile. They don't even know. They get in front of Facebook and like, tell us more about this sorcery you guys do with digital waves, and you go like, man, these are the dumbest humans on the planet. And you think about what they're up to, right? Where am I going wrong in this whole thing, DNI? What is your thought on that?
On which part? Your hair?
on his hair. Let's start there.
I still have it. You know
Start
what?
with tucking your ponytail into your collar for a job interview.
No, I'm talking about
well,
the whole Ross Perot thing and the business guy. A business guy running the country. I mean, somebody who understands the significance of business, because it all
in concept that makes sense, because the politicians, just didn't really practice, and I'm generalizing, but fiscal responsibility. I mean, you look at the repo market now, that's just crazy out of control recklessness. And, they did a bailout, and I talked about this a lot on my stream. They did a bailout, but repackaged it as something else, and then didn't get any pushback on doing it. I mean, they kept changing the dollar amounts, going bigger and bigger, pushing back the deadlines, right? It just seemed like there was just no fiscal responsibility there, or financial responsibility whatsoever. You can make an argument for why they did it too. Don't get me wrong, but I'm simplifying a complex topic. But I don't even know where I was going with all of that. Just
awesome.
The businessmen as politicians
or businesswomen. Let's be
okay. Yeah,
here, man.
There you go.
Because a woman probably could do a better job when it comes to maybe the financials. I don't know. I'm just.
Was that a little segue for Ivanka there? Did you create an opening there?
No, well, you never know, man. I mean, she's making. She's a lot more metered. I prefer Don Jr. style, if anything, because he's like a madman. He's like, he grew the beard. He turned into like, if you grow a beard, you get a little crazy, right? So Ted Cruz grew the beard. Now he's like a hit little bastard. He's like, and he's doing these little videos and stuff. And Don Jr. grew his beard. I don't know. There's like beard badassery going on there.
There's something about the beard. What do you think, Triple D? You got the beard.
Yeah,
we got a resident expert here.
Yeah, I am the only one with the beard. That's kind of weird.
That's because you're the only badass on the show, man. I mean, let's talk.
It's all right. Yeah. I've had a beard since I could grow it. I mean, I don't even remember when I started growing it, when I was 16, 17, maybe. Yeah.
You're right. He's always been a badass.
He's always the badass. That's a really great way to say it. I've always been a badass. I mean, guys, please. Look at that. I mean, look at the hat. He's got the shirt. I mean, what the hell, man?
I didn't even notice the shirt until just now, man. You got the custom shirt on too.
Not playing.
Oh, look at that. I like it.
He's
custom shirts. Did someone say
Zach
custom
actually
shirts?
Says D3.
We're going to talk about the custom shirts in the after show, and we are coming up on that time. So before we move on to the after show, which we definitely want you guys all to check it out, go to the link below, and you're going to see a link directly below to our Coil after show, and make sure you click it. Make sure you go and enjoy and have some fun with that. Before we kick off to the after show, though, I want Triple D to give a shout out, because this is coming up on the 28th of January in NYC. Give a quick shout out to the meetup.
Yeah, so we're having a huge meetup. There's actually over 160 people now going.
Damn.
Cool.
Those are all confirmed. So January 28th, 7 to 9 p.m. in Lair East. That's in 424 Broadway, Suite 602. It's actually right near the Federal Reserve, which I think is awesome.
Going to protest.
So yeah, from 7 to 9, we actually have a bunch of people going. The person that made the meetup his name is Mo. Really nice guy, has a lot of information. Bunch of speakers are going. We have some CEOs of some fintech companies going to be there.
Really? Oh man.
We got some contact
XRP Labs is going to be there. So it's going to be an awesome
find out
turnout.
more about it? Where would they go to find out? Are you guys on meetup.com? Or
it's actually my pinned tweet. So if you go on Twitter, you go on at David Delgado 914. It's my pinned tweet. Can't miss it. See it right there.
Got it.
We're going to put a link right below there
you
too.
go.
So check out the link, get all that info. And we definitely want to have you back on to get some feedback afterwards.
I might be actually live streaming it. I'm going to see what I could do. I might be live streaming it.
Cool.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
That'd be sweet. We're looking forward to that. So let's do a quick round of parting words from the roundtable, and then we're going to move on to the after show on Coil. Check out the link below. Go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, I want to say that something special happened on this broadcast. Early, I dropped the words, I think I used quash or something like that, and then everybody proceeded to use it. I don't think Badassery Triple D did, but all of a sudden, like, I'm going to have to review this video because we all started saying it, and I was like, I haven't used that word in years. Where did it come? I don't know. So that's my big takeaway. I mean, words you don't use often, right? And
We increased our vocabulary.
and now we're
Now
gonna,
being removed
let's
from
throw
my
it to let's throw it to DNI, and DNI, you have a limit, an hour and a half. Keep it under the. See if you can kind of keep it under the hour 20, or actually, we're gonna modify that a minute 20.
I'm gonna leave.
Okay.
I'll come back and we'll see you tomorrow
Go
morning.
walk your
We'll
dog,
be
have
here.
breakfast, and go to the gym. And when you come
And
back,
he'll still be here with his
I
parting words.
might be in my summary stage. No, no, there's just a lot of good things going on with our space and with Ripple and XRP, and we'll just keep moving forward. And you know, check out my channel, Digital Nomad Investor, on YouTube,
Also, link
and
down below.
Twitter, and cool. Put a link below, and all my contact info is there. And we'll just keep pushing ahead.
All right, and parting words from Triple D.
Yeah, this was awesome for me actually, because I've been watching all you guys for so long. You know, I started my YouTube channel about a month and a half ago, so I have like 25 followers. So for you guys to invite me on, I really appreciate
Well, let's see
that.
if we can blow you
Another
up a
link
little
below.
bit.
Yeah,
Double that.
yeah.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
actually, I put all you guys. I made a video called my top YouTubers to watch for info on XRP. All you guys are on there, so you should
thank you.
definitely go check that out.
Well,
Thank you.
All right.
Another link below.
Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate you guys having me on the show, so getting my input on things. Yeah, I mean, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Awesome.
guys, Jeff and Chip, and looking forward to, you know, onthechain.io blowing up. So that's going to be exciting.
Fantastic.
And
Yeah,
the new
we're looking
show,
for it. And the new show. Go ahead, Chip. Take us out.
DNI.
Do
I'm
another
gonna talk us
plug
out,
for the
guys.
show.
Here's another plug. Go to right now. I want you to go there. Well, not right now. Okay, now. Okay, go to onthechain.io. You'll see all the contributors there. You'll see DNI. You'll see a bunch of friendly faces. Actually, we have some other contributors coming up next week's show that are semi-confirmed right now. But just to let you know, the community, we're all in this together. We started this because we wanted to bring community together. We wanted to bring the creators together. But really, this happens because of you showing up here and giving your input, and you share a lot of really insightful stuff, and we share with each other. So I want to just thank everybody here watching. Thank you for your participation, because we can't do this without you and your important feedback. So you're a very important part in what make this community tick. Go ahead, Jeff.
Awesome. That's
Definitely.
it. I love it. And we'll see you guys next week on the Roundtable. Look out for the new deep dive show with DNI, and join us.
And the after show below, which you're going to go click
After
right
show
now. and
below.
watch. It's really bloviate some more.
See you next week.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
See you guys. Thank you, everyone.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.